So I had this idea that it could be useful to have an open letter specifically from American Jews to show precisely that Jewish Americans are not monolithic supporters of everything that the Israeli government does, right or wrong. We had to come out and say to the official Jewish organizations and to the right-wing lobbies like AIPAC, we had to say, wait a minute, you guys don't speak for all American Jews. It ended with one thing that was fairly radical, which said that if the Israeli government would not commit itself to a negotiated settlement of this kind, then the United States should cut off its subsidy of the Israeli government, which is a huge subsidy. The US government has to get tough with Israel and say, look, this is what it's going to have to be, and if you really are going to continue to reject this, then why the hell should the American taxpayer be subsidizing you? If you want to have an endless war with the Palestinians to keep your settlements in the West Bank, well, fine, but do it yourself, not with our money, not with our military support.
Really what it comes down to is just not being an asshole, you know. I think there's a universal, you know, there's a universal rule that you shouldn't be an asshole.
We've made decisions not to visit the country because it would be so uncomfortable.
I never went back to Israel since 2000. I want nothing to do with that country, forgive me. I love it. I was born there. The skies and the streets and the museums and the theater was all in my blood. But they don't allow 5 million people to be human beings.
But I believe that you're getting more feeling that Israel is wrong. And more people of notoriety are saying it.
There is a hollowing out of passion and a hollowing out of the sense of unity of purpose on these topics that I can see. I can smell it.
Palestinians are not allowed to go in certain places because they're Palestinian. And if that's not similar in some very fundamental way, at least, to South African apartheid, then I don't know what is.
I use the apartheid analogy. I have it on my water bottle here.
People my age who have at their core an idea that, you know, in life they're responsible to building a better world, are not committed to Israel.
Now, in my house and in Jewish communities that I run in, I do feel a lot more of an eagerness to discuss Israel, or at least to, you know, accept me for the views that I have.
I'm a Jewish writer, and so much of what I read and write and the people I converse with, some of my best friends in publishing are Jews, you know. But the situation on the ground in Israel is so different from anything that I experience with my fellow Jews that I almost have nothing to, I mean, what is there to say? You know, there are many Jews that support Israel blindly. And, you know, I think it was Abraham Foxman said, you know, they decide and we support, you know. And which is so against the spirit of anything Jewish, because all we do is debate. If you go to Israel, all they do is debate. But something like that is, after you hear that said often enough, and you're a young, inquisitive Jew, you think, well, the hell with this. You decide, I won't support, but, you know, you do whatever you want. Have fun with this. Have a, you know, completely ultra-Orthodox cabinet, throw stones at 8-year-old girls because their dresses are slightly above their ankle. I mean, do whatever you want. What does this have to do with me so many thousands of miles away and living such a different life?
So yeah, this makes a lot of people feel alienated from Judaism altogether. Not want to really participate in their synagogue life if they feel that it requires a kind of agreement with Israeli policies.
I would like to see Israel continue as a country, obviously. Why shouldn't it exist? But if it's going to exist as a democracy, it will have to be a state where there are two populations and where they live and where there is a pure democracy between them.
I think there is somewhat of a crisis about how Judaism today is branding itself, and how and what opportunities and points of entry there are for young people who want Judaism to be compatible with their values.
When Americans are taught, there are certain principles that Martin Luther King fought for, that as Americans we all believe in, and these are not controversial. Now we know that not so long ago they were controversial. Not so long ago people were totally entrenched in their views, and segregation was a respectable position, right? Well, more and more young people have been raised with Martin Luther King Day and learning about the civil rights movement in their schools, and they are applying the principles of civil rights across the board. And if they're American Jews, that means they're applying those principles to Israel-Palestine also. So that's got to be a reason for a certain optimism.
Obviously, we as American Jews, I think, can't be supporting this on a moral basis. I mean, it doesn't matter whether they have the same religion as us or not, whether they hold the same set of beliefs as we do or not. They're people. They deserve their human rights just like we have.
I think that it's an unnuanced view of a 16-year-old, and you know, I was no different at 16, and you know, it's kind of rare for 16-year-olds to have a totally, you know, gray and highly nuanced perspective. But I think, you know, he's sort of trying it out, and he'll keep thinking about things, and so I think that's better than, I don't know, better, but it's certainly good enough, you know, rather than sort of like I just passively accept everything that somebody told me to believe.
You know, that of all the things Israel has done and of all that it has meant in history, that the human rights abuses really have risen to the fore was a kind of gift. Well, it was shocking to realize that for him, but it was also kind of a gift from the young. Yes, that's an attitude that we have to confront, the truth we have to deal with.
There has been a huge response from people who have been either standing behind what I'm doing and saying that this is an example of the Jewish youth stopping their support for Israel and finally taking human rights abuses into account, or they've been saying that I'm an anti-Semite and I'm doing one of the most destructive things you can possibly do for Judaism. They also say things like, I haven't been to Israel recently, I'm not in Israel now, so I can't have a definitive understanding of what's going on there. Things like that. What they don't say is that Israel is treating Palestinians fairly. I have yet to hear that from anybody.
My uncle says something which I wish in Yiddish, which I wish I could repeat because it sounds better in Yiddish, like so many things, than it does in English. But it's like, you know, it's hard to be a Jew, but by what he doesn't mean, you know, struggling with anti-Semitism or being a minority or whatever. He means you have to think about who you are and what your place is in the world. Like, you can't avoid grappling with those questions. And I think the question that comes up around Jesse's essay is, how can you be an us without there being a them? You know, how can there be two subject positions? How can we be us and allow them to be an us also? And there's no easy answer to that.
And you know, what I always say is go read the Humanities, the end of the House of Atreus cycle. How Aeschylus resolves this kind of like cycle of violence and retribution is in this very sort of, at the end, Orestes is basically let off, is being chased around by these furies, these harpies who are manifestations of his guilt at having murdered his mother, who murdered his father, who murdered his sister. And how do you get out of that? The way that they get out of it is to make this kind of sort of sleazy deal. Apollo shows up and says, look, he says to the Furies, we'll build you a nice temple and you can sleep here forever, and leave him alone. And he'll make these libations. And it always, it's unsatisfying in a certain sense if what you want from history is grand opera. But I think the point of the Humanities is it doesn't resolve in grand opera. It resolves in an unsatisfying but bearable compromise. And as time moves forward, circumstances transform, and there is a certain kind of compromising that's necessary in moving ahead and not being, eternally trapped in a cycle of retribution and revenge.